Hello and welcome to Sunrise Cardcast, your one-stop podcast shop for all things hockey cards. My name is Eric Andrews, also known in the hobby as Hammerhawks, and I'm easy for me to say, joined by my co-host and fellow hobbyist Aaron Goldstein, better known as Crease Collector. So it's been a little while since we've done kind of a topic slash conversation based episode. So I know that both of us, especially Aaron, are excited to get back to that. Kind of some of the roots of the podcast are having more of those, hobby conversation based episode topics. So yeah, we're excited to get back to that. But before we do get to that main topic, we'll start off with some mail and some hobby news that has kind of been on the radar of late. So yeah, we'll start out with the mail. I typically don't show too many of my pickups for my 0304 project. For one reason or another, a lot of them, with as many cards that there are on the, master checklist, there's kind of a lot of cards that really just aren't worth showing off. Some of them certainly are, but a lot of them aren't. But this mail day was a pretty fun one because I recently was able to pick up a lot of 38.
Oh, wow. Look at that. That's amazing.
It's a big
I know you
stack.
said that you don't want to share them all off, but I mean, if you were to show all your 0304 pickups, you'd be showing cards left and right all
Yeah.
the time. Maybe all of them wouldn't be that notable, but still, that's a haul right there. That's fantastic.
Yeah. So a lot of 38 different cards from the 0304 Be a Player Ultimate Memorabilia set, which is one of my favorite products from that season. I remember, when it came out, and it was obviously in the game's highest end product at the time, and just a very well done product. But the base set for the product are all autograph cards, and the veteran autograph cards are numbered out of 135, and then the rookies are numbered out of 100, and then there were what was called the limited autograph segment of the checklist that had some of like the best players, the best active players, and then retired players and legends, making up that part of the checklist. Those are all numbered out of 19, so those are like a needle in a haystack at this point. But yeah, so this lot of 38 is all just veteran and rookies. But again, going back to how limited they all are, it's a very difficult set to put together. It was back at the time, obviously nowadays even more so because they just don't show up. So yeah, there was a guy on eBay who I know is a longtime Hobby Insider guy actually as well. I don't think he's super active on there anymore, but was, more so back in the day. But I know he had gone after this set and apparently decided to move on from them. And over the course of a couple weeks, just pretty much dumped all of them on eBay. And I was able to pick up 38 of them, like I said. So I don't have individual scans that I'll put on the screen because that would be a lot. So I'll just hold them all up and kind of go through the stack one by one in numerical order as they are on the checklist if you're wanting to keep track at home. So first one up, again, all of the veterans are numbered out of 135. So this is card number 1 on the checklist of Alexei Kovalev.
Nice. Yeah, those cards are fantastic. It's going to be nice to see you go through these. But yeah, even a card out of, like, was it 135?
Yep.
Like all these years later is just, surprisingly sneaky, I would think. Especially if you're collecting such like a deep set, there's going to be those names that just don't really come off that often. So, so great of you to, pick up that lot. And yeah, it's going to be fun seeing you go through this. It's always kind of daunting when a lot of cards come up at once because you never know, especially since they're so, I guess, sneaky rare. And the checklist would be, pretty intense. And as you mentioned, other people collect the set. A couple of them probably would go for a decent amount, and you kind of don't know which ones those are going to be.
Yep.
And they could kind of sneak up on you. Like this player is like, like maybe that's like a couple bucks or something like that. And some of them very well might be. But there's going to be those random names. Maybe you'll share a couple that are just this. As soon as the auction ends, you're sitting there staring at it, being like, you might have won, but this is not what I expected to pay for this card or this player for this set, whatever it is. So it's always fun when a lot of, cards come up for sale at the same time, especially for a set or a player collector. But there's those certain types of cards that I'm sure Eric will share that it's kind of, you take the good with the bad. I'll just say that.
You certainly do, yeah. I was good about kind of setting a number in my head for each player
That's
that I
good.
needed,
That's good.
and there were a few that I was like, "No, like, I'm not doing that." Like,
I
that's
would love
just
to hear those names. It's like if you want to go through the cards and maybe say
yeah,
a couple of those prices that were just sort of
that would be fun.
out
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, we can do that for sure. That's a
That's
good idea.
great.
Yeah, I like that idea a lot. So we'll do that. So yeah, Kovalev is the first one, and even that's kind of an interesting one because you just don't see a whole lot of autographs of him.
No, you don't.
So yeah, that's a fun one to start off with. And like I said, card number 1 on the checklist. Next one up is Ray Whitney.
Nice.
We've got Eric Cole.
Awesome. I always like the some people aren't a fan of it, but the hard signed, with sort of like the other layer underneath. I've always kind of liked that style, that sort of like recessed autograph
Yep.
design, if you will.
Yep.
Always looked pretty cool. I liked it. I know it's different than having, the whole design all laid out and then the player just signs the card. It's a little bit different, but I've always liked it.
Yep. Next one up, Ryan Smith. Obviously, that's a more well-known name there. But yeah, there are definitely a few names in this lot that some of you might say, who?
I mean, it's also a 304. You got to give it that. And
yeah,
in the
20
game,
years ago.
yeah, and in the game was always good about putting in those cards of players that don't get the hobby love.
True.
So you're gonna get what you're gonna get, which makes it fun. I'm sure it's fun collecting a set where some of the names are not as known, but you sort of enjoy that little piece of hockey history a little bit more. You're like, oh, this guy, I remember this guy. Whereas if not many people collect base sets anymore, so you don't really get that anymore. And the autograph from memorabilia sets nowadays are sort of like the same cookie cutter names. By collecting an older set, especially from in the game, it kind of gives you that really cool variety. So that's awesome.
Yep. Next one up, a guy that's probably more so known nowadays for his analysis work on the TNT panel, Anson Carter.
Oh, nice.
That's a cool one. This one's one of my favorites because he was kind of my first favorite player, Jocelyn Thibault.
Oh, cool. And I know there's a lot of Thibault collectors out there, so I'm sure they love hearing about that one.
Yes. Yeah, I
That's
started
awesome.
out in my very early days of playing hockey. I was a goalie, and he was obviously the Blackhawks goalie at the time. So
I didn't know you were a goalie.
I was for one spring hockey season, but my team was so good that I pretty much never got any shots. So I was a little bit bored. So I ended up turning into a skater. Yep.
It's amazing. So you probably had statistically the best goaltending season probably ever out of all time of goalies ever.
Maybe it's possible. Next up, Alexei Yashin. Again, kind of a name that you don't see too many autographs for.
I remember him. That's awesome.
Again, similar concept here. Barrett Jackman, former Calder Trophy winner.
Nice. Is it bad that we know these names? Because it's kind of like dating us a little bit. So I don't know
with them.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know if maybe some of the younger listeners here are kind of really just who is that?
Even if so, there are definitely a few names to come that people will certainly know. That's for sure. There are some good names in this lot for sure. So, Glenn Murray, obviously a pretty premier power forward back in the day. Next one, this is one of the better ones, I would say. Sergei Gonchar.
Oh, nice.
That's pictured awesome. With the Bruins, and then you've also got Felix Potvin.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's a pretty prominent cameo right there for Potvin.
That is.
That is so cool. I know there's a good number of Potvin collectors out there. Maybe they should pick up that card. That's cool.
True. Give a quick shout out to Jeremy. He just popped in the chat. Hope you're doing well,
hey, Jeremy. How's it going, man?
Next up, a guy that passed away fairly recently, so rest in peace. He was a player that I really liked back at this time. I remember seeing him play in person, I think this season with the LA Kings, Roman Cechmanek.
Oh, I remember him.
This was definitely
great against the Leafs.
This was definitely one that kind of went a little bit higher than I thought it would, but
I was gonna say, I mean, we'll go through some of the names, but when collecting an old set, especially from in the game, there's always those sneaky names that you never really hear of, and yeah, they might go for, I don't want to say big money, but
yeah, none of them were
sneaky
well.
money,
There
sneaky
were
money.
there were a couple that were decent, but yeah, most of these for context were in like the $5 to $10 range, so
Yeah, yeah.
not too bad.
Okay,
Um,
sounds about
Next
right.
up, a name that most people would know, Jay Bouwmeester. I remember him fondly with the Chicago Wolves during the 04-05 lockout when they had him and Kari Lettinen were kind of the two big star young studs that were on that lockout team. So that was a fun one there. Next one up, this is definitely one of the better names of the lot, Patrick Eliash.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Again, don't see too many autographs for
No,
him,
you
so that's
don't.
a
Nice
cool
photo
one.
there with the cup patch. I always love when they have like a nice patch or something, on the photo. It's really great.
Indeed. Next up, another Blackhawk. So this one was definitely near and dear to my heart, even though a lot of people might not know the name nowadays. Tyler Arneson. He was kind of a hyped up player back at that point. Had a couple decent seasons, and then kind of just never really did much after that. Next one up, Sergei Samsonov. Had a pretty good career. Next one, I like this one. I know you'll like this one, Aaron. The Stanley Cup winning goaltender from this season, Nikolai Habibulin.
Ooh, man, he has a great autograph.
He does.
It's fantastic. I have a signed puck by him, and I just love the autograph on it. It's fantastic. I really should try and pick up a signed card of him or something at one point because, yeah, fantastic autograph. Love that.
Funny that you said that. I actually also have a Habibulin signed puck.
Is it a Winter Classic puck though?
It is not. It's actually just a blank puck from a summer practice after he signed with the Blackhawks.
Oh,
So,
that's cool.
yep, he.
Bool and Wall. That's right.
That's right, the Bull and Wall. Definitely a cool nickname from that era. Next up, another goalie, Mark Denis. Again, a guy
Oh,
who's
Mark Denis, loved him.
known for his TV work nowadays.
Yep.
This is definitely one of the biggest names of the lot. 2003 Conn Smythe winner, J.S. Giguère.
Ooh, oh man, that's great. Oh, well, that's a great card. I love that. I love all the Jaguars you're getting. When it comes to the 304 master set or master. What do we call that if you're going after the base sets
Master
for every
collection.
master? I don't know what
Collection.
to call it. Not master set, but yeah, master collection.
Yep. So yeah, that's a cool one. Another very big name for the lot, head coach of the Montreal Canadiens, Marty St. Louis.
Even better. That's awesome. My cousin's favorite player. That's fantastic.
Nice.
Marty St. Louis, loved him.
I wore 26 for one season because of him and Steve Sullivan. So another one of my faves
Okay.
growing up. Another big name now, kind of. Well, I mean, people know him for his playing career, but also for his time in the front office with the LA Kings, Rob Blake.
Nice. Couple big Blake
And
collectors back in the day.
the final veteran, numbered out of 135. Jeremy, you'll like this one. This is probably arguably the biggest name out of the entire veteran base checklist, so I was happy to land one of these. Teemu Selanne.
Oh man. Pictured as an Av too.
That's right.
You don't see that much at all. I mean, again, I'm not big into Selanne cards. Nothing against him, obviously, but yeah, I don't think you'd see too much of him as far as any autos as a member of the Avalanche. But that's great. What a great card.
Yep. So I was definitely glad to get that one. That was the most expensive one out of the entire lot, which I figured would be the case. So
yeah,
but just said, I got to cross that one off the list.
Oh
so
yeah, 100%.
there we go. So then on to the rookies. Again, these are these are all numbered out of 100 now for the rookies. So first one up, a name that most people would certainly know for the Washington Capitals, Alexander Semin.
Great. Looks like you just printed his name.
Pretty much, yeah.
Amazing to see how his autograph sort of evolved, because that's just him literally writing his name.
Yep.
I don't know if I've seen that before. I mean, in various degrees, because it's all a signature, but that's pretty close to just printing your name.
Yep. Well, cool. I mean, Russian and probably
exactly. That's what
fresh to learning English and
exactly. Hey, how do you write my name in English? Cool, I'll just do that.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yep.
That's great.
Next up, a guy who was pretty hyped at the time and did have a good career, but was never like a superstar level player, Joffrey Lupul.
Nice.
Kind of interestingly, there are a few rookies in the set that used blue ink for whatever reason, whereas everybody else used black. So
Probably just had it laying
you
around.
know, it gets mixed up every now and then, but that's a cool one. Yuri Hoodler for the Detroit Red Wings.
Nice. I remember him.
Yep, good career. Dan Fritchie for the Columbus Blue Jackets.
Love those photo shoot photos.
Yeah, I think that might be. I think that's probably a draft photo,
Yeah.
actually, which is cool. This guy had a very solid career. Paul Martin,
Oh, nice.
guy who I really liked with the Blackhawks, never really became what we hoped he would, but an exciting player, a skilled player, but yeah, just never became the superstar. Pavel Vorobiev.
Okay.
Actually, kind of thought about collecting him at one point, but never made the leap. Next one up, a guy that probably most people don't really know this name. He never really did much in the NHL. Matthew Spiller for the Coyotes. I think he pretty much just had a cup of coffee that season, or maybe played most of that season, but that was pretty much it.
I wonder how many random story. My old goalie coach Mike Mole. I remember him telling me about his time in the NHL. It was very brief. I think it was backing up for 2 games or something like that. And he actually told me about the cup of coffee that he had. He wasn't really big on drinking coffee itself, but we were talking to him about his experience, and we're like, "So did you get your cup of coffee?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, no, I had to make sure I got a cup of coffee at the NHL level, like when I got called up, in the building and all that good stuff." And yeah, if I made it to the show, like I'm not a big coffee guy either. I don't drink it, but I would definitely have my cup of coffee, and I'm sure it would taste like the best cup of coffee in the world. And I'm
True.
sure for many guys, I would love to hear. Like, there should be like a podcast series about, you know, their first coffee in the NHL. Like, do you know what brand it was? Did you like it? Have you tried to replicate it since then? Have you got hooked on coffee since then? I don't know. If you drink it, does it remind you of your first NHL game? I don't know.
That'd be funny.
Sorry to interrupt. It just a
No,
random thing that just came to mind.
I love
Cup
it.
of coffee in the NHL. Love it. Podcast
Somebody do
segment.
that.
We're
Somebody do
gonna
that.
run with it. We're doing it.
Jeremy, with all your extra time for podcasting, you should do that for sure. So
Yeah, cup of coffee segment. Why not?
next up, this guy had a pretty decent career, I would say. Chris Higgins.
That's great.
Next one up, I know I told you about this one, Aaron, but a guy who was very hyped at the time and did have a pretty promising career for a few years and then kind of just fizzled out. Nikolai Zherdev for the Columbus Blue Jackets. And what's cool about this one, I did not know at the time, but it is actually jersey numbered 13 out of 100.
Hey, that's fantastic.
So nice little bonus there.
Nice.
Next up, another guy who was pretty highly touted at the time and had a decent career, Joni Pitkinen. Next up, this is the best of the rookie lot, and I think this was the second most expensive, which doesn't surprise me. I know this guy sells very well thanks to one of our friends and then some other people in the hobby as well. For the Nashville Predators, Jordan Tutu.
Oh, there we go. Okay. I thought you were going to say Flurry for a second, but I'm pretty sure you have one.
I do.
No?
I have the
Okay.
Flurry already.
I have one as well, and they're really cool cards. So, yeah, the rookie versions. Fantastic.
Yep. Next up, Antti Miettinen for the Dallas Stars, another guy who had a decent career. This might be the most unknown random name of the bunch. Definitely just a cup of coffee guy for the Edmonton Oilers, Doug Lynch.
There we go. Nice draft photo.
So, yep. Like you're saying, fun to see some names that you haven't thought of in many years.
Nope.
Back to more of the known quantities. Dan Hamhuis had a pretty good career. Getting down to the final three here. Another guy who signed in blue, Freddie Sjustrom.
Nice.
And for the Washington Capitals, Boyd Gordon. And rounding out the lot of 38 cards for the Toronto Maple Leafs, Kyle Wellwood.
Oh, nice. Wellwood. Good old Wellwood. That's awesome. Nice way to end with a Leaf, too.
Yep. So he is the final rookie on the checklist, and then the next card is the start of the limited subset. So, yeah. So crossing off 38 cards for that set was pretty
Fantastic.
fun. So,
How many more do you need, roughly?
oh, I don't know. I have almost all of the limited ones because that was kind of like my focus, like
Yeah,
get the hard ones out of the way first.
true.
So there are 35 limited autos, and I have 32 of the 35 of those. And then rookie wise, I'm probably like maybe 75 or 80% done on that.
It's not bad.
And then the veterans, I haven't focused too much on just because they are the easiest of the bunch to find. So yeah, I don't know, maybe like a third of the way on those or something. So
Not too bad.
still got a ways to go, but yeah. And then as far as ones that I bid on but did not win,
Okay.
I'll go through some of these. One of the ones that was kind of a little surprising on the final price was Milan Mahalik. He ended up going
Okay.
for 11 US, which just I don't know,
Okay.
that seemed high to me, but so I decided not to go that high.
Okay. You're
Dustin,
really hitting a ceiling. As soon as it goes over this ceiling, you're not bidding.
yeah, I was
I
like,
respect that.
that's just it's like I can get it. I'll get
I
one
respect
cheaper
it.
at some point. This one, the price makes sense. I just didn't really feel like paying this much for it at the moment. Dustin Brown went for about 21 US, which that's
Okay.
not unreasonable in my opinion.
Yeah, it's pretty fair.
This one kind of surprised me. Tim Gleason went for $7. I figured that would be like a
$7.
like two or
Wow.
three. So yeah, that was an easy pass. Chris Kunitz went for $9 again, kind of similar to Brown. Like I think that was fair, but just not right now. Not feeling it at that price. Couple goalies, Mike Dunham and Rick DiPietro. In hindsight, probably fair prices, $5 each. But again, I was like, kind of
DiPietro.
compared to what I was paying for some of the other ones when those ones were ending. I was like, that just feels a little bit higher than they should be. But
Yeah.
um, Nico Kapanen. I won't go through all the prices, but Nico Kapanen, Rostislav Klesla, that's an interesting name. I know there's a guy on Hobby Insider who goes after his stuff, so I'm
Yeah.
wondering if he was the
It's
guy who got
possible.
that one. Joe Nieuwendyk, that was a decent name that went a little bit higher than I was hoping for. David Legwand and Vinny Damphus and Mark Recchi. So
Okay.
yeah, so those were the ones I missed out on, but obviously got the majority of the ones that I was going after. So yeah.
That's awesome. I mean, especially you snagging the Timo. I think getting the big ones is obviously a good step, and those other ones will come in at some point for sure.
Yeah, and that was kind of part of my thinking on it as well. I'd rather pay more, get the Solani than pick up
Exactly.
3 or 4 kind of random guys. So yeah, that definitely factored into the thinking a little bit there, and kind of same with the Jordan 2 similar type of thing there. So yeah, did not really intend on spending over 20 minutes going through those,
No,
but
it's okay.
here we
I mean,
are.
my story's kind of interrupted you, but go
No,
on.
no, no. You're good. So, yeah, so that's the first segment of the mail day. Then we'll switch over to 2 individual cards that I do have scans for. So I'll get rid of the overlay here. Let me pop that off. So this first one, I have to give a big shout out to Josh Packham, our buddy, for this one, because I pretty much had not really paid much attention to the Fanatics Collect auctions. I know some people are very much into that. Jeremy, I know you obviously are. But a lot of the stuff that I collect just doesn't really show up on there. So I just haven't really paid too much attention to it. But yeah, this was probably, I don't know, like 2 or 3 months ago at this point. Josh just said, hey, I saw this card. I thought you might like it. Just passing it along. And he was very much correct. I'm definitely glad he did because it's a beautiful card. Really glad to have it in my collection. It's from 0102 Be a Player Ultimate Memorabilia. So continuing that product line as far as the show and tell segment here. From the Emblem Addict set, which I know a lot of people loved these cards back in the day, for the Chicago Blackhawks of Bobby Hull. Just a
That's fantastic.
beautiful, beautiful 4-color
Great.
feather patch there with parts of the orange and yellow feathers. Um, yeah, obviously, with the print run being out of 5, these are just awesome cards. I mean, you know, really cool design, great memorabilia piece, huge name in the hobby, and the history of hockey. So, yeah, that card just very quickly spoke to me, and I just said that would be a really nice card to add to my Blackhawks collection. So, yeah, I was able to win the auction for that one, and then kind of just had it sitting around in my newly created Fanatics vault for a little while, and then finally got around to having it sent home a few weeks ago. So,
That's
yeah,
awesome.
definitely a really sweet card that I'm very, very happy to have in the collection because it is just a stunning, stunning patch, and really like the design, kind of like with the wood pattern and then the
Yeah,
Blackhawks logo behind. Just a really sharp looking card and nice full body image. And yeah, it's just a great card. So was very glad to add that one to the collection for sure. And again, thank you, Josh, for letting me know about it. Really appreciate it. And the next one, I've had this one for a little while now. I was considering slash originally planning on showing it during the last episode, but then kind of just wanted to have the focus be on your expo experience and your pickups. So that's kind of why I did not. But I know this is something just like having a really nice memorabilia card of this guy has been on my want list for a while. I have some cards of him, but nothing quite like this. So it was really, really awesome to pick this up. And I will just let the scan talk for itself, and then Aaron, obviously, feel free to react when you see it.
definitely. Oh man, I was thinking Gretzky, and it's Gretzky. That's fantastic. Look at that nice Rangers patch. Wow, that's great. Huh, that's awesome. I picked up a Gretzky at the expo, and then this is like coming in hot. It's so nice. It's relatable though. It's great.
It
Both of
is.
us
It
with
is.
Yeah, both of us with the Gretzky pickups recently. That's awesome. Look at that, numbered out of 50. Great Rangers patch there. Oh, you can't get much better than that for the Rangers. Nice blue,
Yeah.
silver, red, white. I mean, just can't get any better than that.
Yep. From
That's
one of
amazing.
the Lady Liberty alternate
Yep.
jerseys, and
Great
yeah,
jersey.
I loved 0506 artifacts. I have the Crosby rookie from the set, so figured it would kind of make for a nice little pair in that regard. But yeah, I just saw this card probably, I don't know, a month or so ago at this point, and just said like, I got to get that card. Like
Yeah,
that's just an amazing card.
it is an amazing
Um,
card.
so was able to work out a deal with the guy who had it, and yeah, I know. Shout out to you, Jeremy. I know I asked for you to give the guy a vouch, so I appreciate that. That definitely gave me some peace of mind, since you had done a deal with him. I think earlier this year, you said. So appreciate that. But yeah, I mean, what more do you really need to say about a card like that? I mean, it's Gretzky.
Can't
It's
say
a
much.
iconic year of the hobby and great patch and all that. So yeah, like I said, I'd had some a little bit more basic of Gretzky memorabilia cards, but knew one day I would really want to grab a really nice patch. And yeah, this one just checked all the boxes for me for sure. So
That's awesome.
definitely glad to have that one in the collection. And yeah, it is a beautiful card in person for sure. So
Amazing. Well done.
yeah, thank you. So that will do it for the mail segment of the episode. Next up, we will transition. A lot of you guys are probably familiar that earlier this year there was a case of 1979 80 O-Pee-Chee that sold, and we thought that was, kind of maybe the end of the story. We might see it open, maybe not, who knows. Well, and then the buyer never paid for it. So here we are, 9 months later? I think it sold in February originally. And it was just announced fairly recently that the case would be put back up for auction. I know the owner and Heritage Auctions had kind of had some discussions. What do we do? Do we want to pursue any legal action? What do we do? Um, so yeah, originally sold in February for $3.72 million US, which is
Crazy.
a very hefty price tag. We talked about it back at the time. You guys may or may not recall, but yeah, like I said, the buyer, who is a Canadian real estate agent, did not pay for the case. He claims that he had paid $3 million. Heritage is now claiming that he never paid a single penny.
Interesting.
So yeah, kind of interesting there. But at the end of the day, he didn't pay for it, so obviously he did not get the case. So, yeah, like I said, the owners and Heritage decided to put the case back up for auction rather than pursuing legal action or hoping that the guy would pay or setting up a payment plan or whatever. So yeah, it's back up for auction. It is ending in Heritage's auction that ends on December 5th. So I know that's something I will definitely be keeping an eye on just to see what ends up happening. I know as of about an hour ago, it was at 1.26 million USD with the buyer's premium, and Heritage does still have it valued at 3+ million. So it'll be interesting to see. Obviously there was a second bidder that got it up to that initial price point back in February. So it'll be interesting to see, if it gets back up to this to that same price again, or maybe a little bit less. I would have a hard time thinking it goes higher, but you never know. Maybe there were some people that just couldn't swing it at the time, and now they can, or they missed out, or whatever. But yeah, that'll be really fun to keep tabs on. I don't know if you have any further thought on that, Aaron.
I mean, we kind of knew, but we didn't know. But we talked a little bit about it back in, I forget what episode number it was, but we kind of went through this how what someone would need to do in order to kind of make that case worth it,
Hmm.
and kind of went through what you need to hit in terms of Gretzky's, conditions. I think there was a potential of 27 Gretzky's or something like that.
On
Um,
average, yep.
that you could potentially hit. Yeah, potentially. And we kind of broke down kind of what you would need to do with those Gretzky's, or how they would need to sort of perform grading wise for this to be really kind of worth your while here. So just based on that, it just seemed like an overpayment. And yeah, not really surprised that this is happening. I think at the time, some people even sort of maybe sort of half jokingly figured, well, there's no way someone's going to pay that. I get it, they want it at that price, but I don't know if anyone would really follow through on that final price there. So yeah, I'm not really surprised. The way that this one's went. It'll be interesting to see what it resells for, but I'm not really like when I heard the news, I was like, I'm not really surprised. And then when you told me before we kind of went live here that the guy hasn't even paid yet, like not even a single cent, that sort of adds like a sort of extra wrinkle in it, and it all kind of makes sense. I don't want to start any rumors or anything like that, but apparently the guy might have been a little bit maybe under the influence when he was sort of bidding on this thing. Again, just what I've heard, but I mean, things just sort of didn't really add up as far as the final price is concerned. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see what it resells for, and I guess I'll just leave it at that. So,
Yeah, it'll definitely be fun to keep an eye on over the next couple weeks here for sure. So, yeah. And then transitioning to our main topic, the conversation piece of the episode, kind of a quote unquote state of the hobby union about card shows. Obviously, last episode we talked about Aaron's experience at the expo, and then kind of when we were debriefing after the episode, we kind of just got talking about our views on how card shows have kind of trended over the last few years, kind of post COVID, and some of the observations that we've had, and just kind of our thoughts and feelings about that. And we just said, hey, that would probably be a fun topic to talk about on the next episode. So here we are. Um, Jeremy, I'm actually really glad that you're here watching. If you have any thoughts, feel free to pop them in the chat. If you agree with what we're saying, if we're way off line, let us know, because you're at way more shows than we are, and you interact with way more people than we do. So yeah, feel free to share your thoughts, and we'll pop those up on screen. But yeah, I don't know. Do you want to start the conversation on this one, Aaron, since you're fresh off the expo?
sure, I guess so. Hopefully, I'm not like an old guy um, yelling at clouds. Actually, side note, is the fan too loud? There's a fan in the room, and it's okay. Good.
Didn't
It
even
just turned
notice.
on. Good. Just turned on. So I'm staying at a hotel, so I don't control everything in my environment. But anyway, I'll continue. So yeah, I don't want to sound like an old guy kind of yelling at clouds or anything like that. Not the intention. I realize that going to shows, you're going to get a lot of different people from a lot of different hobby backgrounds. Some none at all. It might be their first show, especially with the expo. It's huge, right? It attracts a lot of people, which is fantastic. And it's great for the hobby. I don't want to discourage anyone. None of that. Everyone's welcome, 150%. However, I just noticed the I guess with anything, when something hits the sort of mainstream, that everything becomes, I guess, cool, and it becomes like a show. And so you kind of notice that a little bit at the expo, like with sort of like the influencer kind of broy type style of, I guess, conducting yourself sort of in the hobby. And again, it sounds like a slippery slope. It sounds like a little bit of a someone who might not get it in this new sort of digital sort of space that we find ourselves in. But to me, it just doesn't rub me the wrong way per se. It's just different. You know what I mean? If you're breaking a box, for example, it's you see people doing it a little bit, and it's not about the experience really. Again, I could be totally wrong, and I'm not talking about everybody, of course. But some things I notice, it doesn't seem to be about for everybody the experience about maybe opening a box, or appreciating the base cards or anything like that, or the inserts. It's sort of like big hit or bust. And I get it, with the certain, I guess, shall we say, pricing strategies that exist nowadays. We're kind of sort of led down a path of that, where of course it's sort of hit or bust, because like, Aaron, the price I paid for this box, it's crazy. I gotta be in that sort of hit or bust mindset. And maybe it's a bunch of factors involved, but it just, I don't know, like I remember getting a box back in the day, and it was special. It was really, really special. And it was just appreciating every single card that came out of that box. And it was just fantastic. And I think now with and maybe it has to do with there's so many cards out there now every single year, so much new stuff. And then as soon as you get the new stuff, you're already preparing for the next thing that's coming out. And so you don't really get a chance to sort of really focus on what you're actually getting. um, but I don't know, I think just a little bit of that magic per se is getting lost a little bit. And so you notice that as far as like breaking and things like that. And maybe this is sort of like the squeaky wheel gets the oil a little bit too. But as far as like the you know influencer type of you know presence at the show, it just, I don't know, it's just different. I'm not going to say it's bad, because I love social media. I love the influencer. um, uh, what am I trying to say? I really enjoy the influencer impact, in the sense of you could really give people, as far as the audience goes, a lot of knowledge, a lot of really good take home thoughts or take home facts about various aspects of the hobby. I think that's fantastic. Again, the digital world that I mentioned, it allows people, even us, to interact with a lot of people at one time. And I think that's a very good thing. I just feel like there might be, if there's sort of like a negative spin on it, I think there might be a little bit of, if you don't collect a certain thing or a certain player, or you don't collect the newest, latest and greatest thing, it's sort of like you're pushed aside a little bit too quickly. Whereas I think before, through the ways of just word of mouth and maybe forums a little bit, it sort of fostered a more, in my opinion, a more closely knit community. And I think we were able to, and I guess through our own backgrounds in growing up in a different, age and stage of the hobby, allowed us to sort of appreciate what each other has in a way. And I think now it's just a little bit different. So I kind of noticed that a little bit. You go to different booths and it's all sort of the same thing. Again, not always. I don't want to generalize, but there is a lot of the same sort of, players mentioned, and, in their showcase. And granted, we're not always looking through the bins that they have, and then they do have a lot to offer. However, there's always this emphasis on, a select uh, group of players, which is great. I love those players just as much as the next guy. I might not collect them, but I appreciate those players, and I love watching them, and I love what they bring to the game and the NHL night in, night out. But as far as a hobby perspective, it's just a little bit overwhelming, I guess would be the right way to put it. So, I don't want to, appear like I'm, speaking too negatively. Um, See you, Jeremy. Um, I don't want to appear that I'm speaking too negatively or anything like that on the hobby. I love the hobby. I'm going to collect for as long as I can, but things are just different. And it seems to be, if I can sort of sum up everything that I'm saying as far as these initial thoughts go, it just seems like, um, you know, if you're new to the hobby now, I think it would sort of appear like you need to collect a certain handful of players. And if you don't, then what you have is sort of not I don't want to say good enough, but maybe not appreciated as I think it would have been in years past. So I don't know if any of that made sense, but a little bit of rambling there. But hopefully, I could sort of summarize it okay.
Yeah, no, I would definitely agree. Um, you touched on this exact thought earlier, but one thing that immediately comes to my mind when having a conversation like this is a quote that one of my high school teachers said that has always just kind of stuck with me, and I think about every now and then. Different isn't bad; it's just different. So I think
That's
that's
great.
that's a good thing for
Okay.
to think about, perspective wise and things, and not just jump to judgment. Um, but I would largely agree with what you said there, Aaron. I think, um, especially when it comes to kind of like the influencer population within the hobby, is it's more about like the spectacle instead of like the actual collecting aspect of it.
That's a good way to put it too. It's more about the spectacle. That would probably be a really good way to you know spin it. Took the words out of my mouth. That's a great way to put it.
So, well, I've had more time to think about it. So,
That is
but,
true.
but, um, yeah, and I haven't been to the expo, so I can't speak to that specific show. However, I have been to the national many, many times and multiple times since COVID. And, I know the national is a bigger show than the expo. So take what you saw, Aaron, and then multiply it. And that's the national.
Okay.
Especially considering that the national is more so focused on baseball, basketball, and football than it is on
Yes, which
hockey.
is like
Take it to a whole other level.
hobby on steroids. Like whatever's going on in hockey, yeah, definitely. Like multiply it by whatever number you want, because it is definitely just next couple levels above. That's
Yeah.
that's true. So you sort of
So
see this like what I'm sort of talking about, but again, also kind of multiplied by 3-4 times what I'm seeing. So yeah, it'd be interesting to hear your take as well, especially like you said, you're going to a bigger show, but you're also going to a show that highlights different sports that are far and above what we collect, which is hockey. Um, so yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts as well.
yeah, so I mean, with that thought, I think it's just like obviously the other sports have bigger followings, bigger hobby bases. So there are even more of those like types of influencers and content creators and stuff in other sports. So I think at a show like the National, it's even like way more apparent than I imagine the Expo would be. And yeah, I mean, it was almost like, I don't know if alarming is the right word, but yeah, I remember the 2021 national. So the first national post COVID shutdowns. Um, it just felt like there were cameras everywhere,
Yeah,
and like
yeah,
it was just crazy. I mean, and even in 2023 as well. I forget. It might have been. It might have. Nah, I don't think it was Ken Golden. I don't remember who it was. Some one of the big people in the hobby as a whole were recording like an episode of their show, It definitely wasn't Ken Golden. I don't remember who it was
I
now,
don't
but
think his show was his show out by then? It might have been.
I don't.
Or if it
You might be right. I don't know.
maybe if it was in production, but I don't know if it was like released yet. Maybe it
Yeah,
was. Maybe it was. But anyway.
yeah. Who it was isn't important, but whoever it was, I remember them going up to a booth while they were recording their show, and it was just like, here's this, there's multiple cameras and like a boom mic, and then just like this huge crowd of people following them around to see what's going on,
And
and it's
here's your
just this
Steph
like,
Curry logo man and all that.
yeah, it's just like this
All that stuff.
huge spectacle that's like, I
Huh.
get that this appeals to some people, but like to me, that's just not the hobby. Like I don't know. Like
Right.
it struck me as just being like, I don't know, like I've been going to these shows for 20 years and like I've never seen this before.
Yeah.
What are we doing
Is
here?
it, do we got to get with the times? Because I know we're in that sort of age range, right? I'm 31, going on 32, so I know we're on the same sort of uh, you know age and stage of life, and so maybe we're in that weird middle point. I also heard a quote as well. It was like, when you're in your 30s, you're not old enough to be old, but you're not young either. So it's like, what are we? Like, we don't even know who we are. You know what I mean? So it's like, maybe this is us slowly finding out in real time for everybody to see and listen to that we don't really get it anymore. And it honestly, like, I'm totally for that. If someone younger listen to this who loves cards and loves going to shows and sees the same stuff that we do, just says, man, like these guys just don't like get it. Like this is sort of the hobby now. And that's fair, 100%. But just on our podcast, we're going to talk about the things that we notice. And for people who grew up in a different stage of the hobby, this is new. Again, I'm not going to say it's bad or doesn't have its, you know, it has like horrible outcomes. It's like, no, I'm not saying that at all. It could
It's
have some
just
good
different.
outcomes. It's just different, and we're just sort of talking about it and noticing it. And yeah, like when you talk about the cameras, that was I think it was around the same stage. It was probably like 2021, or yeah, just post or kind of during COVID uh, card show. And I remember seeing my first camera and being like just looking, and this whole crowd of people were following this person, and I was just like, what are we doing? Like, what are we did I just see what I think I saw? It was just a weird, bizarre moment, and yeah, just strange.
And even like going back to my experiences at the last couple Chicago-based nationals, obviously you have like that, which is like top tier of like that aspect of the hobby. But even just like individual people walking around holding like a GoPro and like talking about whatever they were seeing and stuff like that. And yeah, it's very different. And like that's also not to say that I don't enjoy consuming any of that content. Like I know Grant Patterson with GP Sports Cards, he always does kind of like show recap videos, and I always enjoy seeing the stuff that he buys and stuff at shows, and that's cool. But yeah, it's just I don't know, like it always kind of strikes me as being just a little strange that like I don't know, like even me, like yeah, we're content creators. Um, but like I'm not going into the national saying, "Oh, I'm just going to walk around with a camera all the time." Like
Right, or have like a live sort of episode, you know, booth to booth type thing. Yeah, just different style.
mhm.
I don't personally consume that sort of, I guess, live like booth recaps or anything like that. Nothing against it. It's just I just personally don't. But
Mhm.
that's interesting.
Yeah, so just kind of an interesting, I don't know. I feel like it was more apparent in 2021, and maybe I was just more desensitized to it in 2023 because I was expecting it, or maybe there were just fewer people doing it. I don't know. Yeah, like I mean, I remember pre-COVID, you would go to a show and you would just go around to booths and look and find stuff and buy stuff and trade and whatever. And there really was no like spectacle about it. Like everyone's just doing their own thing and keeping to themselves for the most part. And
Regarding, or sorry, I'll let you finish your thought.
No, go ahead.
Like regarding, like you mentioned, looking into, some booths and stuff like that. Do you notice the content themselves inside these display cases are sort of changing? Because just at the last expo, and I sort of noticed, there's the flavor of the month, and of course you got your all stars in the tables and whatnot, and you go to the next one, it's very similar, and obviously every booth does not have the same thing, but it just sort of seems like a trend, but towards those flavor of the month sort of pieces, and I don't know if it was always like that either. I mean, not to say that a good card wouldn't make, someone's showcase. Obviously, it would. And if a certain product just dropped, sure, you might see some more cards of that. But I think, booth to booth, I think not across the board, everybody, but I think, some of them are sort of morphing into the same thing. Whereas maybe, 5, 6 years ago, you would see maybe a little bit more variety.
Yeah, no, that's a very fair point. I know, I know we talked about this on the podcast at the time, but the 2021 National was terrible for that, in my opinion. I feel like pre-COVID, the National was probably like 10% hockey, like somewhere around there. And the 2021 National, I would say generously was 1%. And of that 1%, it felt like every booth that had hockey, you saw Gretzky rookie cards, you saw McDavid Young Guns, you saw Crosby Young Guns, Ovechkin Young Guns, Matthews Young Guns, and that was it.
Right.
Like it was just like, yep, like if you're going to see hockey, it's probably one of those cards. Outside of maybe a handful of booths that were more dedicated to purely being hockey, that then they would have more variety. But yeah, any kind of like mixed types of booths that had a variety of sports, if they had hockey, it was probably one of those names and probably those cards. So yeah, I mean, it was. I would say at the 2021 National, I saw triple-digit Gretzky rookie cards. Like it's like
that's crazy.
That was the
That
most
is crazy.
common hockey card at the show, and
It's
like
amazing.
I get it. Like it's a Gretzky rookie card.
Oh yeah, like great cards. Like I would love to, have a bunch of Gretzky rookies I can go and just choose and buy. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that you shouldn't have those cards at a show. It's just I guess the mindset of I gotta have these cards and put my prime focus on that. And then a lot of other booths are sort of having that same mindset. So yeah, just different. Whereas I think before I would have more luck, looking through, someone's showcase and seeing something, that I would really enjoy. Again, I realize I'm not, a high roller collector, and there are deals to be had, and there's some great cards to find. But I just feel like maybe not the same players always. I mean, there definitely is that, but more of a focus on, I get, flavor of the month. And that could come in different forms, maybe from different products, across this year, maybe last year, maybe some of the same player focus. You're not seeing all the same cards all the time, but maybe certain players or, a new product just dropped, like I said, and maybe you're trying to, get a lot of gold for something that really isn't worth, what it should be worth. Just a lot of flavor of the month, or they want it to be that flavor of the month sort of items in their showcase. So
yeah. So I'm glad you brought that up, because that's definitely something that I have noticed, especially in 2021. Like I said, there was something else I was going to talk about too. It's not coming to mind now, of course. This is kind of an interesting, and I want to tread very lightly with this topic, because it's both a huge positive from a hobby standpoint, but also I feel like just like, I don't know if like the execution is the right way of putting it, but is kind of a negative. That being just like the presence of kids at shows.
Oh yeah.
And the fact that there are so many kids that are interested in the hobby is absolutely fantastic.
I
Like, we
100%
need that.
agree with you.
We
100%.
we
It's great seeing the kids at the in these shows. It's
mhm.
fantastic for the health of the hobby. Yeah, continue.
Yeah, so, like, it is awesome to see as many young collectors as there are at shows. I know, I think it was even it might have I can't remember if it was 21 or 23 at the national. I think it was 2023, I wanna say. There was one kind of, like, area that I think in hindsight was, like, the Fanatics booth or maybe the Tops booth one, or they might have been nearby, whatever, but they must have had like a kids themed like event happening, because there's just this huge section of the floor that, like, it was just like a line of kids, like hundreds of kids. And like, that's awesome. Like, so great that there are that many kids that are interested in the hobby, want to be involved, want to collect all that. Um, and maybe we just weren't aware of it growing up because we were younger at the time, so we didn't think much of it. But I feel like I just don't remember there being as many kids who were like active collectors at shows pre-COVID. So that's great. But then, kind of on the flip side of that, and again, I want to tread lightly here. I feel like it's just a very different kind of like mentality or outlook that a lot of kids have, kind of more trending in that like influencer category,
Mhm.
where they're purely focused on like high end and all of the cool trendy type of stuff. And again, there's no right or wrong way of doing things. Different isn't bad, it's just different. you know can't stress those things enough. um yeah, it's just like, again, to me, like, kids walking around with briefcases that have thousands of dollars of cards,
I
and
was
they
just
have
gonna say I
thousands of
watched a
dollars in cash, and like,
yeah, like
it's
it's
like,
nuts.
what? Like, what is happening? Like, this
It's
is not
crazy.
like, what? So, yeah, and again, like, I'm sure there are kids that are in that category that are truly devoted
Yeah,
collectors that love the hobby.
100%.
They're having a great time with it. But I feel like so much of it, and again, I really don't interact with like that aspect of the hobby, like the influencer type of stuff, because it just doesn't appeal to me at all. But from what I do see, it's just like, I don't know, like, how is this even happening? Like, how are we having all
Right.
these kids that have collections that are like into the five figures, and like, I also understand that LeBron cards 10 years ago are much different than what they are now. Values have gone way up and all that. I understand that. um but
Or
still,
parents with deep pockets,
yeah, it's
funding the whole thing.
right,
It's
right,
there's that as well for sure in any
yeah.
sort of hobby, 100%.
I think I would say that's probably the majority of this
Yeah,
issue.
yeah, for
um
sure.
so yeah, there's positives, there's negatives to that, but just kind of a definitely something that I've noticed a lot more in recent years is just like this huge influx of young money, I guess, if you want to say that.
Young money, okay.
Um, yeah, again, not bad necessarily, just very different than it was when we were getting into the hobby. So,
Yeah, yeah,
um,
I definitely agree. I mean,
so
yeah, I'm gonna say something, and I don't want to be taken the wrong way because, like you, Eric, I think it's a great thing that the younger generation is getting involved in the hobby. It's something I've been involved with since the '90s, and I was a kid back then, but when it came to the early 2000s, and when I started getting a little bit older and really sort of you know started to learn a little bit more about the hobby, it's something that I've been involved ever since. And so it's a great hobby. We love it so much. That's why we're doing this. That's why we're like on a podcast. We didn't see anything really for hockey cards out there at the time, and we said let's just do it ourselves. You know what I mean? So that's why we're here. That's why we're doing it. But I will say this: we both agree that it's a great thing for the hobby that younger people are involved. I think we can both agree on that. However, I'm going to say something. Is the current hobby in its current form or current state appropriate for younger kids today? You know what I mean? Like, for example, if we're breaking something back in the day, maybe you beg your parents for some, Christmas gift, you know.
I think we lost Aaron for a second there.
Oh, you lost me. Can you still hear me?
Can hear you, can't see you.
There we
There you
go.
are.
I'm back.
Cool.
My screen just went blank for a second. Hold on. I'm
You're
going to
good.
grab a charger and then I'm going to finish my
Okay.
thought. Give me 2
Okay.
seconds.
Sounds good. Yeah, I think even, kind of to pick up on that point, I think where you're going with that is definitely a good point. So I'm curious to hear the rest of your thoughts that will be coming any second, hopefully in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1,
I am
0.
back.
Continue.
Awesome. Okay, look at that. That's fantastic. Okay, so sorry about that. The joys of hotel internet. Okay, so anyway, just getting back into it. Okay, so the current state of the hobby, is it appropriate for kids? Like back in the day, you, maybe beg your parents for, a box of something for Christmas, which I did 1 or 2 years, or, maybe you get a job one day and, speaking of like younger kids to maybe like teenager type years here, and you start making your own money and that's fantastic. And you want to buy some cards or buy a box or something like that. And that's fantastic. And, you should be able to spend the money however you wish. Awesome. But, the current hobby, if we're breaking something back in the day and you like 40, $50, not a problem. It's not a big deal. But in the current state of the hobby, or if you're, you know, putting that money into group breaks or something like that, there wasn't the avenue back in the day to sort of lose out on a lot of, money. Whereas, I mean, there's always a way, in any sort of, like whatever you grew up, there's always a way to lose money. But
It wasn't as convenient.
yeah, and just sort of focusing on the hobby. If you buy a box and get nothing, you lose like 40, $50 maybe, right? Now you lose hundreds of dollars, and it's terrible. Or if you go to collect a certain player or sort of buy certain cards because that's what you think you should be doing, and or investing in a certain player where you don't know that chances are that person isn't going to really amount to much card wise, or you're buying high at these inflated, in my opinion, card prices for most players, or after release, and breakers are trying to make back their money, and everything like that, whoever received this card or that card in a break, and they're selling high, and some people might unfortunately fall victim to that sort of practice in the hobby. Whereas back in the day, it just wasn't as convenient to sort of lose a lot of money, financially, right? So I think it's really great that kids are in the hobby today, for sure. But I think, is it an appropriate landscape for them? And if I was a kid and I made some not so great trades over the years, and you kind of get burned, or maybe you spend money on a card and you're like, well, I probably should have paid maybe half that, if that, right? Whereas now you're paying so much more for these, cards that are desirable because they're the fresh new thing. And you could potentially sink a lot of money in certain cards very fast and get just absolutely skunked before you know it. And you don't even realize it's happening, right? Until a year later and the player's just not doing what they are supposed to be doing, or good player, but they're not the new thing now, right? And so you potentially really sunk in a lot of money as an investment because that's what you were told to do, or influence to do, and you could potentially be, in a hole very quickly. Yeah, it's very alarming the way the hobby is sort of, I don't want to say set people up, but it could be, the hobby nowadays, it's a very dangerous minefield, I would say. And I think with kids getting involved in that, it's potentially very scary. And I'm just wondering if that sort of thing will impact the hobby long term. Because you see this rush of new people getting in, great, but with the ease of access and ease of buying cards and things like that, and information, sometimes not always good information, and with the rise of social media and cards and algorithm, and showing you what you think you should be viewing, and if you're not experienced in the hobby, you could potentially get burned very badly, very, very quickly. And I think, whereas back in the day, you made a bad deal, even a bad trade, there's no financial aspect, not directly anyway, but you make a bad deal and then you feel really crummy about it. I've done that, and it really kind of sours you a little bit. Where, it's all right, you pick up the cards that you really want and sort of get back on the horse quicker because they're easier to get. Versus now, if you spend a lot of money for all these cards, maybe you make some trades, you get taken advantage of, which could have happened in any sort of generation. But now, in order to sort of get back on the horse that we love about this hobby, it's harder to, sort of buy back into, at these sort of prices. And so I'm just wondering here, I'm just thinking out loud, that the current landscape being a minefield, in my opinion, would that sort of turn a lot of collectors off long term, I'm saying. When this sort of investment or bubble or grading card, slab junk wax era type thing sort of ends. It sort of has died down already, but will those same people that were so stoked to come into the hobby and had such great intentions, be looking at, the exit door more quickly than, say, we would have if you get burned once or twice and it's not as big of a deal? That's what I'm kind of wondering. It's great to see people involved, but the thing that they're getting involved with is a lot more dangerous than it was in years past. And that is what I'm worried about. Very concerned. So anyway, maybe it's just sort of an old man yelling at cloud things. Hey, that's all right. If you think that I'm doing that and I don't know what I'm talking about, totally fair. That's your opinion. No problem. But that's just something I've, noticed the hobby being all about certain things. And I can only imagine, and I've done this a little bit before and done these sort of thought exercises, I can only imagine what it would be like to enter my card collecting journey today. Say I'm, I want to collect those Hall of Fame goalies. Great. Well, they're 5 times the price that they were back then. If I want to player collect and start off with someone's rookie year, which can be very intense and get a lot of different cards nowadays, it's crazy. Again, not basketball, football, or baseball levels, but just speaking of hockey, it has grown. And I can only imagine, say if, I've thought this before, what if Enroth debuted, a couple weeks ago, and I'm so excited about his cards, and then some new cards release, and I'm just so, gung-ho about it that, you do some things that, you really shouldn't have done, and you get burned quite badly. So I'm really worried about it. Anyway, I rambled, but I'll let Eric speak. But that's just sort of my thoughts. Like, is this environment good for the young people of the hobby today? That I'm not so sure.
That is a great thought for sure. And just kind of hearing you talk about it, kind of, the phrase that I kind of thought of is like, the hobby is so high stakes now, and
Yep.
how the vast majority of the hobby and products work nowadays are not intended for kids. And while that is okay in and of itself, the issue with that is the things that are kind of more directed toward kids and newer collectors are very much deemed as like not cool, not good enough, any of that. So I think that's where it could get into that kind of dangerous element that you were kind of touching on is, well, using hockey as an example, if you're a young collector, new collector, and maybe all you can afford or all you're willing to spend on is MVP. That's fine. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But with how kind of the hobby landscape is, especially with all the influencers and all that, like if that's what you're collecting, a lot of those people are just going to either look down on you or not even give you the time of day in the first place because that's not cool. That's not good enough. That's not what the hobby is, which obviously that's not true. So I think there's that, kind of aspect of it. But then also on the flip side, if you say, well, like I want to be, appreciated and respected in the hobby, so I have to go after, this more expensive, higher end stuff. To your point, well, that's probably not appropriate for a young collector or maybe a newer collector to be doing. Sure, there are, the mega rich kids walking around with thousands of dollars at shows, and we're not necessarily talking about those kids in this conversation, but because that's just a totally different thing where obviously the money isn't really all that important at the end of the day. If they spend $100 or something, it's, they're not even going to notice. But for the majority of normal people, that's not the case. So, yeah, that's a really, really good point that you brought up. I mean, even just like in terms of the mentality that is the hobby as a whole right now, being so like heavily focused on like the gambling of group breaking and box breaking and grading and stuff like that, like to me again, like that's not the hobby. Like not that there's anything wrong with opening boxes or grading cards or anything like that, but like that's just not the truest sense of collecting in my opinion. um and like we open boxes from time to time, we grade cards from time to time. We're not saying that blanket statement those things are bad. It's just kind of the hyper focus on those things, and that like this is what you have to be doing, like this is where the bar is for like acceptable or good enough in this hobby. That's
Yeah.
a problem. That's a
Right.
problem, and I think that's very apparent at shows, like even more than just like on a daily basis online, because yeah, it can be overwhelming on social media sometimes seeing stuff like that. But if you're physically in it and surrounded by it and it's happening all around you at a show, like I can definitely feel like that would be just kind of like a very overwhelming, crushing type of feeling, like what am I doing? Like I'm not doing this right or whatever. um, so yeah, that's a very good point for sure.
Yeah.
um,
It's so interesting, again, back to my previous point, just I can only imagine entering in the hobby today. And Eric, I'll ask you the same question, and then I'll follow it up with
mhm,
something else. But if you were starting to collect today, and say, you fast forward a bit and say, you already decided, want to be a player collector, because I mean, we collect different things, but I think that's where we would kind of put ourselves at now, primarily speaking.
mhm,
Um, and so, you fast forward a little bit through those, discovery years in your collecting journey, and you said, okay, I'm a player collector. And then the next day you start collecting a certain player. Would you have kept up with the hobby? Like think about it. Like the amount of times we potentially would have got burned on paying too much. And just think of the hype. Like we didn't have the experience knowing when to hold or fold or whatever it is. And we probably would have got sucked in. I, I probably would have, for sure. And you're led to paying these outrageous prices for players that, oh yeah, they'll pan out for sure. For sure. 100%. There'll always be a demand like this for these cards. If I want to sell one and make some money back or something, oh yeah, that'll always be available. So would you be collecting today? So really, it's a tough question.
it is a tough question because obviously we're kind of biased in our thoughts of like
We are biased.
it's easy to say, oh, of course I would,
Right.
right? Like that's the easy answer. But if you think about it, um, and one thing I liked when you're kind of posing the question you're talking about a little bit earlier in the night, but just kind of how the landscape of the hobby has changed in terms of the amount of cards that players have. Like, I
Right.
look at Jalmerson and Slavin as my two main guys, as you guys see right here.
Yep. Behind him.
Um, they just like looking at their rookie year, don't have that many cards.
Right.
Granted, they weren't the most hyped players by any means as rookies, so that factors into it. Slavin also debuted a little bit later into the season, so he missed some of the earlier releases. But even looking at Jalmerson, he was a carryover rookie for 0809, and he did not have that many cards as a rookie in 0809. He has some, it's not a small amount, but you compare that to what a carryover rookie has nowadays, where even a guy who played 2 games in the league and
Yep.
will never play again has hundreds of cards.
That's crazy. I wonder if we could. Oh, we should have looked up on just for reference. Maybe you can do that now, or I have it open here. Maybe I'll just throw that up here, just for fun. I actually do have a trading card database open right now, so I can
Perfect.
actually go to the rookie year. So, and it is a lot. I just have Enroth open here, and I'll pull up Slavin here in a second here. Or if you have any other, or you know what? Maybe I'll start with Jalmerson.
Yeah, now granted, it'll probably pull up all of his printing plates, which I don't include on my checklist, but I just pulled up my checklist just for the heck of it here, and I am seeing, let's see, it's a little bit difficult because I have the Upper Deck Black Letterman cards all as their own cards, so it's a little bit
I think
different, but
I mean, like if you're off by a handful of cards or two, that's okay. But even with printing plates, like I would still include those just as like a sort of, if you're a new collector, this is what's sort of available to you,
so for
or just to get.
Jalmerson, not including plates, I see 34 cards,
Okay.
and that he was a carryover rookie.
And when was his rookie year? Was it? It was 0809.
0809. Yep.
Okay.
So 34
So
different cards as a carryover rookie.
okay. So on trading card database, it would include some one of ones and things like that, but it's listed at 63. And again, I
Yeah,
haven't gone through all the cards. Maybe there's
that
some
would be
missing,
plates for
but
sure.
yeah,
But yeah,
yeah. So yeah, and then looking over at Enroth, just as we sort of look through our main PC guys here. So Enroth was sort of a traditional, I guess. He was a good prospect at the time. He was a pretty hyped up guy way back in 09. So he has in his rookie year, and it's quite a lot. I don't know how exactly it would compare to today's rookies, but he has 170 cards in 09-10. So that's quite significant. I'll go
hmm
to Bedard just for fun. I'm
and keep
just
in
gonna.
mind, there's still a lot of 23-24 products still to come.
Yeah, you know what? Maybe I should choose another name here.
Go to like I'm trying to think of a random 22-23
Yeah, I
rookie.
know.
Um, I also don't want to pick like a huge name because they're gonna have more.
Well, I mean,
Um,
any sort of like good prospect. You know what I mean? It could be a huge prospect, because
sure.
then they would be
Try.
kind
I
of
mean,
relegated.
try like even like Owen Power.
Yeah, I had the name Owen Power on the tip of my tongue.
Obviously, first overall pick, much higher, more hyped up guy than what we're talking
Yeah,
about for our collections.
yeah.
But to
So total
illustrate,
cards, yeah. So total cards here, and I'll go to the rookie year in a second. But total cards, he's at almost 1,500, which is crazy, man. That's just unreal. Okay, so then rookie year. Oh, that's insane, man. So 22-23
which
cards.
just finished releasing with Upper Deck
Yeah.
Premier
So
this
okay.
last week.
So this is really interesting, actually. Okay, so Owen Power, Buffalo Sabres guy. So I think if Enroth were to come out today, he would have probably similar amount of cards. Maybe I'm off by
A
a
little
bit,
less.
but
Yeah,
less, but in the
close.
same
Yeah,
ballpark, I would say.
sure.
Um, but do you want
Or
to
even
guess?
how about compare him to like, well, I was gonna say Devin Levi, but he's 23-24, so never mind.
Yeah, I was gonna say a goalie too, but anyway. Okay, So do you want to guess how many cards Owen Power has in 22-23?
I would say if he has 1,500 total, including 23, 24, and a few 24, 25, I would say like 1,000.
Oh, you're pretty close. You're actually under. He has almost 1,200 cards,
It's crazy.
which is absolutely insane. Like, that
Yeah.
is insane, man. That is crazy. Could you imagine starting a player collection today with the same mindset? Again, fast forward, I know what I want to collect. I know what type of player collector I want to be. And I guess, totals like these would sort of forcibly make you rethink your attitude towards collecting. Say a completionist player collection. But yeah, like, it's
Well, yeah,
crazy.
that's it. It's not even
It's
possible.
great. No, it's insane. So I mean, would I be collecting? Like, I would be collecting, um, but would I be a completionist player collector? Which for the longest time I always wanted to do, and I just luckily sort of stumbled into it. And the card, amounts, as far as the number of cards out there, made sense for me. And over time, it's been great. A good mix. But yeah, I don't think I would have the type of collection I would now if Enroth, for example, debuted nowadays in the NHL. And it sucks. I feel for guys who want to super collect nowadays in that sense, and see it, and they're like, man, I really want to do that. I just want to find my guy. It's really hard to do that now. It's really, really difficult. Or you do that, or to a certain point, do get involved with a player and collecting their cards, but you're spending boatloads of money that maybe you think, and we all sort of think this sometimes, but the investment sort of value of what we're collecting, not across the board, but if you pay for a card, you do kind of wonder, what is this worth? Is it worth what I'm paying for it, or is it potentially worth a little bit more, maybe soon or in a year, whatever it is? And so, yeah, if you're paying these prices for this amount of cards for these type of players that let's face it, they won't really pan out value wise. Um, it's a recipe for disaster and a lot of heartbreak, honestly. And that type of heartbreak, that deep sort of scarring that some people could get, it would really turn people off the hobby. Like, honestly, it really would. And whereas back in the day, it's like, yeah, it'll sting. You make a bad trade, or you collect a player that didn't work out. Yeah, like we've all been there. But you can get back on the horse so much easier, and really find your path so much easier, right? Oh, I'm going to switch to collecting a different player. Cool, no problem. I'm finally getting more cards of this certain player that I saw them debut, and then this is my guy for sure. Well, it's hard to do that now, and yeah, I'm just wondering if this is like a recipe for disaster, really, and it's just crazy.
Yeah, well, I think, and that, I mean, that kind of goes back into like the high stakes element that it is now. Not
Yeah,
even just in terms of like the pricing, but even just like in the quality, but also the quantity, like we were talking about. I mean, if you
yeah.
are like saying, I'm going to collect so and so from day one, and you really do it, and they're a hyped up player, and you have 500 cards of said guy, and then he falls off the face of the planet. Well, now you have 500 cards of this guy, and you just lost a ton of money. And again, we don't talk about values and investing and money too much on this show, but it is a very critical aspect of the hobby, especially nowadays. And yeah, I mean, I really can't imagine trying to be like a super collector of a new debuting player nowadays, because it just isn't even feasible, not only from a quantity standpoint. I mean, you talk about Owen Power, he's got, whatever you said, around 1,000 cards from his rookie year. I mean, that's an impossible feat in and of itself. But how many of those are numbered out of five or less? Or how many one of ones are there? Tons.
Oh, it's
Whereas you
crazy.
you go back, Jalmerson, not including printing plates, just actual cards,
Right.
has three rookie year one of ones.
I was gonna say probably a handful, if that. Right.
So yeah, and I
Exactly.
have two of the three, and I've
Yeah.
never seen the third. Slavin, same thing. He has a few rookie year 1-of-1s. I have a couple, or no, just one, I think. Yeah, I have one, and haven't seen the other two. So it's like, well,
Right.
that's what it is. But if you're talking about Owen Power, I mean, there's probably at least like 50 1-of-1s, not including printing plates. Like there
Oh,
has
it's
to be.
crazy. Like maybe Owen Power's not the best example. I mean,
Sure.
I've seen people start collecting and and they are trying to do that completionist sort of player collection, which is great. I think there'll always be that attempt, but I think just similar to set collectors, how they're sort of going away now because it's so hard to do it nowadays. Are we witnessing sort of the slow death of the player collector, sort of as we know it? I mean, they're always going to be, oh, I collect a player, and you have a handful of cards as a player, sure. Like you're a player collector, okay. But are we witnessing the death of the, I guess true air quotes player collector? Like, is it
Like super collector. Yeah.
super collector? Yeah, like or completionist collector. Are we witnessing the death of that we saw with, for the most part, set collectors back in the day?
I would
Like,
say no doubt, because it just isn't, it's not feasible anymore, you know?
right, right. And it's one thing if you spend, say, a couple $100 on some cards and you have a really good, you know, budding player collector, that's great. But nowadays you're looking at, a couple $1,000 to get the same number of cards of a player. And yeah, at some point it gets to a point where you just can't do that. You can't. Either financially you hit your limit, or there's ways around that, and you just end up getting in a big hole. It just I don't want to get into all that, but it's just not a really good thing personally for a lot of people to go through. And I think that will turn people off the hobby. It's just the high stakes, you know, eventually people are going to get, you know, not get what they deserve, because no one deserves that. But with high stakes, there's going to be winners and there's going to be losers. And that's just really unfortunate.
Yeah, I
This
agree.
episode's making
So,
me so sad. But it's true. It's just what we're seeing. And it's, I love talking about this stuff. It's interesting. It's hopefully we're not being too dramatic, but it's fun.
or even too negative. Like we're
Or
usually
too
not too
negative.
negative,
No,
but
we're positive
it's
people.
at the same time, like, yeah, you can generally be a positive person, but you still have to be objective and like see the reality of what's going on.
Yeah,
So a
exactly.
lot of this is kind of just our observations of what we've noticed in the hobby as a whole, and kind of how that has been highlighted through big time shows. Now I will use that as a nice segue, because we've been talking about what we have seen on the big scale at the mainstream huge big shows that everyone knows about, everyone cares about, everyone goes to, all that. But I was thinking about this earlier today, and I definitely want to also, on the flip side, talk about those smaller local shows. Your run of the mill, oh, we have a show at the county fairgrounds every other month or every month or whatever. And that generally isn't something that I go to super often, largely because I'm in rural Indiana. And if you say the word hockey here, most people will just kind of look at you weird and say, "What did he say? Like, what? Like, what's hockey?" So
Hockey.
so in my context, I don't go to local shows because I'm not going to find anything that I want.
Right, right.
Um, so it would largely just be a waste of time. But I will say that I have gone to one. I think it was earlier this year, I want to say. Um, a friend of mine who I've referenced on the show quite a few times, and actually had on the show back in, I think it was late 2021, Tyler Dresbach. Um, he lives about a half an hour, 40 minutes away from me. And they have a show. I'm getting frog in my throat here, just a second.
All good.
He has a show in his town. I believe it's once a month. And I don't think he goes every month, but he goes somewhat often, probably 3, 4 times a year. And he is primarily a baseball and basketball guy. So for him, it makes a lot of sense. He can go, he can find a lot of stuff that, he can pick up cheap. It's great for him. Um, like he's a Cincinnati Reds fan and collector. And obviously Cincinnati is probably the closest MLB team to where we are, I would say. So, you will see a lot of Reds stuff at these local shows. So, I tagged along with him one time, and, I don't know exactly how many tables there were, maybe like 40 ish at this show. It was kind of just like in this county fairgrounds building. And yeah, and so we just kind of walked around. I think we were there for maybe, I don't know, like an hour and a half or something, and walked around, saw every table, saw pretty much every card there was at the whole show. And while there wasn't a whole lot there for me, I will say there was a Connor Bedard Young Gun. So it must have been like late March of this year, because it had just come out. So yeah, it was like mid to late March of 2024. That was the second ever Bedard Young Gun that I saw with my own eyes after the one that I had pulled. So yeah, there was very little hockey, that didn't surprise me at all. I was mostly just kind of going to hang out with him and just, have some fun. So, but I will say that the vibe at a show like that, just a small local show, is night and day difference from what you will see at the expo, what you'll see at the national, and even some of these more like regional types of shows. I was referencing Jeremy goes to all kinds of shows, and I know he's not here anymore, but I know Jeremy will kind of go to a lot of those like mid-level type of shows in addition to all the big ones, of course. But just like my perception of this small show, it's just night and day difference, because it's just like quote unquote normal people who have their tables. It's a bunch of like, oh, here's a $5 card, here's a $2 card, here's a $20 card. Like, that's pretty nice, stuff like that. And you're going around, you're just seeing like individual people, like everyday people, just like, hey, I just want a cheap card of Ellie De La Cruz, who's the big name
Right.
rookie for the
Right.
Cincinnati Reds. Like, I
Yep.
just want a De La Cruz card. Like, I just want a Topps base rookie card.
Yeah.
Cool. Or for Tyler, like, oh, I like this pitching prospect. Let me see if I can find a cool insert of him. Oh, here's one for $1. Sweet. Like, I'm
That's
thrilled.
great. That's great.
You'll see, like, that's what the whole show was. Not that there wasn't more expensive stuff. There was, but you're not bombarded with, oh, here's a $2,000 card. Here's a $500 card. Here's a $1,000 card. Here's a $400 box. Here's a $300 box. Like, it's much more like collecting in the truest sense, I would say, which
That's
is
great.
just
That's
like
interesting.
so refreshing to me.
Right.
Even though there wasn't much there at the show for me, I did find something. There was a booth that had some decent hockey stuff. So I did end up picking up a card, but that's beyond the point. But yeah, and even like the one thing that stood out about that show to me, as we were kind of going around, there was one booth that they had some like inserts and stuff from one of the newer Topps baseball products. So Tyler was interested in looking through, seeing if he could find some red stuff. And it was just so cool, because it was a father and his daughter that had set up at this
That's
table.
great.
They said it was their first time ever setting up at a show.
Oh, that's awesome.
They just go to like Walmart and Meijer and stuff like that. They'll buy blasters, collect together. And I think his daughter was just like, let's set up at a show and like see what happens. Like, let's just do it.
That's super
So
cool.
they did this, and I know Tyler found a card or two that he wanted, and bought it off of the daughter, and it was their first sale of the day. So like, she was thrilled, and it was just like, that's what the hobby is about.
Yep.
Like, everything about this interaction at this booth, this is the hobby.
Where both people are happy and they're not scared of getting absolutely destroyed on a box or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So while we were talking about the big mainstream shows and all of the concerning things that you see on a big scale like that, it's also really important to see the polar opposite end of things and say, on a grassroots level, like, there's still so much good in terms of the mentality and the outlook that is still happening in this hobby. So yeah, I definitely wanted to make note of that and say, it's not all bad. It's not all concerning. Like there are
Right.
still like, you know, people doing it the right way, even though we said there's no right and wrong way to collect, which there isn't. But I think it's a lot easier to relate to other people when it's just like a very like innocent, like we're just
Right.
doing this for the pure satisfaction and enjoyment of doing it.
That's
Um,
awesome.
so yeah, even though like I didn't acquire almost anything at that show, it was still like a very just like refreshing experience to be like, yeah, it's not all about the spectacle and the money. Like there is still a lot of just like pure collectors who just enjoy picking up cheap cards of players they like, and that's great.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, that's wonderful. I mean, it's good to know there's hope. We do exist. You know, no, there definitely is that. You have your closer knit network of collectors that you know. I don't want to say groupthink. That's not the right term, but are similar in the way that we collect. We can collect Hall of Famers to non Hall of Famers, but I guess the style is the same. And so yeah, there definitely is people like that, and it's good to see that you found a good bunch at that show. And yeah, I'm sure it would be more common at say a local show. All the big dealers aren't going to go and set up in a random town, right? So it
Right.
makes sense, but it's good to know that that stuff definitely still exists, and it's cool to see that. That might inspire me to get out to a local card show or something like that at some point. Might be a little different if it's still, in the Toronto area. You might still get
Mhm.
some of that, but still, I'm sure it would be definitely a lot toned down than what the big card shows are like. So it's a really good perspective there. So thanks for sharing.
Yeah. Yeah, I should reach out and see if he wants to go again sometime. Maybe maybe
That's
now that
true.
there are more Bedard cards that are out, maybe some people have
Yeah,
some cheaper
and
stuff
they'll
that I
they'll
could pick
bring some
up. So
hockey. Oh, I have this hockey stuff. Picks it up at a garage sale. You never know,
we'll see.
and they'll bring that box. Who knows? That's
Yeah.
great.
So
Cool.
yeah, I don't know. I know we're over an hour and a half at this point, so I don't want to go too long. But
Otherwise,
um,
people won't listen.
true. Yeah, you don't want to get too long, but that's a conversation for another day. But
Yes,
um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it's like we said, kind of as we were easing into the conversation an hour ago. It is a very just like interesting thing to think about. Like,
it is.
how is the landscape of the hobby affecting shows and vice versa? And yeah, I didn't really have too many expectations for this conversation, but I think there was a lot of good thoughts that were shared.
Perfect. Yeah, this was a great episode. It's good to get back to talking and having just a nice discussion episode. Got to do more of that. I think that's great. And you listeners out there, hopefully you enjoyed it just as much as we did talking about it. So yeah, keep on collecting.
Absolutely. So yeah, we'll wrap it up at that. Like I said, we've been going for a little bit longer than normal tonight. So yeah, we'll respect everybody's time and move on with the rest of our nights. So yeah, I guess this is the fourth time that we're doing a live show. And again, if you guys haven't heard or aren't familiar, we are doing them in a live format now with the video and everything. So just a lot easier on our end for production and keeping things timely and stuff like that. So again, be sure that you, in particular, subscribe on YouTube. I know we talk about all of our social media, and I will in a minute again, but YouTube and Facebook especially, because that's where these live streams are happening. So if you, I know on YouTube there's the bell that you can click on that will notify you when we plan on going live, and then I believe will also notify you when we do go live. So make sure you do that in particular. But as always, please be sure to follow us on all of our social media. We can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Sunrise Cardcast, and on Twitter at SunriseCC. Please also be sure to subscribe to the show on your podcast platform of choice to make sure you never miss a future episode. Until next time on Sunrise Cardcast, keep collecting those hockey cards.